Hello everyone, how are you doing? Wish you're all doing well. In our video today, we will talking about the story elements. What is story element? What do we mean when we say this? In this video, we're going to learn about story elements, how can we find them in the story, and are they important to be in the story or no? Stay tuned. Welcome back again. Is story elements. What do we mean by that? Story elements that we will talk about together. The first thing is the characters. The characters in the story. And the characters means people or animals in the story that have a role, that do something in the story. Okay? So we have two kinds of characters. We have the main character and the other one is the secondary character. The main character is the most important characters in the story, and we call them the hero of the story. Okay, and the secondary characters are the characters that are less important than the hero and the main characters. That's the first part. Characters, by the way, characters could be people or animals, birds, okay? But they should have a role in the story itself. Like, for example, if I'm talking about someone, but he's not in the story, so this is not a part of the character, okay? This is not a part of the characters of the story. The next part is the setting. What is the setting of the story? The setting of the story are divided into two things. The first one, which is the place of the story, the place where the story happens, and the second one, which is the time when the story happens. So whenever you have a question asking you about the setting of the story, that means he's asking you about the time and the place of the story. The third part of the story elements is the plot. And the plot actually is divided into three parts. Number one, we call it the beginning of the story, how the story starts. And number two is the middle of the story, and sometimes we call it the conflict. And now we have a question. What is the conflict? The conflict is the challenge or the problem that the main characters of the story face. So, should the hero or the main characters of the story face a problem or a challenge in the story? Yes, they should do this. Because if the story doesn't have any challenge or doesn't have any problem, so the story is not going to be interesting. It will be boring. That's why even if you're going to write a story, so it should have a conflict. Because if your story doesn't have a conflict, that means that it's not interesting. And the third part of the plot is the end of the story, which is the resolution of the story. And now the question, what is the resolution? We know that the conflict is the problem or the challenge that the hero faces. What about the resolution or the end of the story? The resolution is how the story ends, or how the hero was able in the story to put an end for the problem he faced. Okay, so we know now that the elements of the story are three: characters, main characters, and secondary characters; setting, which is place and time; plot of the story, which is the beginning, middle, and the end. Now, let's look at this story. We have a very short story here, and by the way, we have some underlined words here to help you to find the story elements of this story. So we're going to read this story together, and we will write the answers here in this part. So let's read the story. Kaden knew how to spell big words and knew what the words meant. When he took the vocabulary test in class last week, he was the first kid in the class to finish. He turned it in quickly and didn't check his work. When the teacher told him his grade, Caden's face turned bright red. He had failed. She told him that he could retake it. Caden took his time and checked his work. When the teacher gave him his grade, it was perfect score, just like he wanted. Okay, now let's go to the next part. Okay, if we come to this part here to write the answers, and we want to talk about the characters. If we get back to the story here, so you will find that the characters of the story are Caden and his teacher. Okay, if you get back to this table, so we will write here Karen and the teacher. Okay, now what about the setting? Okay, when and where did this story happen? The story happened in class and it happened last week. So, the setting of the story, the place is class and the time is last week. Now, the beginning. How did the story start? If you get back to the story here, you will find that it starts when he had a vocabulary test. That's the most important part. Okay, so we need to write here, Karen had a vocabulary test. Period at the end. And now, what about the middle, which is the conflict of the story? Let's get back to the story. What's the problem that he faced in his story is that he had failed. So, the middle, he, capital letter in the beginning, he had failed. Okay, now what about the end, the resolution? How was this problem solved? If you get back to the story, you will find that he took his time and he checked his work, he checked his answers before he turned his exam or test in. So, here, the resolution is that he took his time and checked his work. Okay, and this is everything about the story elements we have here. Okay, now I'm gonna leave you with this story. I want you now to stop the video, read the story carefully, and I want you to get these pieces of information: character, setting, plot, which is beginning, middle, and conflict, and just send me the answers in the comments. I'll be waiting for that. And finally, if this lesson is not a problem anymore, don't forget to like and share the video in order for the video to reach more learners.